Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about campaign pacing in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. This is a point that gets brought up again and again and again in discussions involving sieges, be it on Reddit, Discord, from other content creators. It is a point that's constantly being made that Creative Assembly needs to make it so that siege battles require an investment of several turns in order to take a settlement, so that the campaign is slowed down, ends up being better, more strategic, more challenging. It doesn't work like that. Just because you slow down something does not make it better. Just because you slow down something doesn't mean it's more strategic, and it also wouldn't work. The reason it wouldn't work is we do have a bunch of units that will be able to attack, that will give the armies the ability of attacking settlements instantly. But even if we didn't have those units, it still wouldn't work for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of the times when you're laying siege to a provincial capital in Warhammer 3, you're probably going to go up against not just the garrison, but you're also going to go up against a defending army. And once you click that intern button, that defending army, those 30, 40 plus units, they're going to sally out. Might be more, might be 60. The enemy might bring reinforcements. They might not have an army in the settlement, but they'll bring one up quickly enough. So all you're really doing is delaying the player until the intern button, compared to just the player attacking a settlement directly. It has an advantage of forcing more field battles, though then we get into the situation that you can auto-resolve field battles far more easily than siege battles currently in the game. So really, if people have an issue with players auto-resolving their siege battles or campaigns, all you're really doing if you force people to take multiple turns to just build siege equipment, you're just pushing them in the direction of just like, okay, I'll just build even more armies better for auto-resolve with high armor to do that better to achieve the job, as opposed to fighting a lot of field battles. Now, for the record, the field battles are more fun, they're more interesting than siege battles, but it's not solving the issue. And a lot of the suggestions people give would also make sieges very, very tedious. So if the idea is improving the siege experience, then that has to be a goal. It can't just be a goal on this idea of like, let's slow players down. Furthermore, beyond the fact that AI will have the tendency to sally out on the intern, will have the tendency of bringing reinforcements and attacking you, there's also something else that you can do. Assuming the AI has no forces, they just have a settlement and they're now willing to sally out, here's what you can do. You get the second lord, you have a couple of units or no units whatsoever in that second lord army, you use that army to besiege a settlement, you use that army to build siege equipment while your main army just moves close enough to the settlement. You're spending your movement points, not all of them. Once the turn is over, you have built the siege equipment, the second army takes the settlement, your main army moves on. So it's achieving nothing. There is an issue in Warhammer 3 with regards to not so much campaign pacing, but rather how uninteresting the end game actually is in the game. Like, no massive empires, or they take a very long time to build up. And even when they build up, they're not necessarily that much of a challenge. Because Warhammer 3, like virtually every Total War that has ever been made, that doesn't matter if we're talking about Rome 1, Medieval 2, Attila, Shogun 2, Total War has always had an inverted difficulty curve. It's the idea that the most challenging part of the game is in the early game, not so much later on. For all the endgame crisis, for the Mongols, Timurids, for Attila, it's always been the case. The early game is the hardest part. You master that, you win, everything else is just a grind. I don't think that's how it should be. And I think the solution to the end game is making a proper difficulty curve where you start playing a campaign, it just gets harder and better, more fun, more interesting as you're playing through it. Let's look at the example of Warhammer 2. People like to use this example as well. That, well, in previous Total War games, the campaign pace was slower, so it was better, more strategic. Not really true. So right here in Total War Warhammer 2, I have a campaign turn 23 as Marafi in Immortal Empires. I've taken Lothern, I've secured my heartland, so to speak. I do have armies from Illyrian and Alariel and a rebel army threatening me here, but I also know if they do attack this element directly, I might not win, but I will certainly leave a lot of them behind. So Marafi's core territory in the Titan Peaks is fairly secure, and even if it's not, I've taken Lothern, I can maintain myself through rebellions. The early game, the first few turns are certainly trickier, but this is an issue that a lot of strategy games do have. It's less about strategy or good pacing or good difficulty design. It's more of a case, okay, what's the trick, the puzzle that I need to solve in order to make this work? In Warhammer 2, like pretty much every Total War game, it's basically fighting the first few battles of your campaign in such a way that you're minimizing your casualties so that you don't have 100 factions declaring war on you. Because with Marafi, you start a war with Terranok, you've got Leifrenar right next to you, you've got Mazdamundi, they don't like you, they're likely to declare war on you, so you gotta be careful on that. But it's really just a question, minimize casualties, at least until a point that Leifrenar has moved up north. Deal with Terranok's invasion of your heartland, like they recruited 3 stacks against me. And I dismantled them one by one. Then it's a question of using ambush tactics, lure them in positions where I wipe them out, and then just marching on their heartland, taking Calador in the process, just sneaking up on Lothern. Using rebellions, like people may talk about like, oh, control doesn't matter because we don't have to invest in it. Well, rebellions are just free XP and money. I've got plenty of rebellions. I've literally triggered them deliberately. Like, I took Terranok, I deliberately triggered one rebellion. This is actually the second rebellion in Terranok. I took Calador, triggered the rebellion. I'm gonna trigger one in Lothern, because I can gain free 4,000 gold and experience from a single rebellion. That's how I'm keeping the war economy running. My point is, you overcome those first few turns well enough, the rest of the campaign doesn't matter. And while it may take longer, while it might be a bigger grind in certain ways, the moment you reach a stage like this, you've effectively won it. The question is how much busy work you're gonna have. To be certain, Warhammer 2 does have a bit of an advantage from the perspective that you won't be able to maintain as many armies, so there's less micro to manage every single turn, but it's certainly not as strategic as, you know, having to deal with multiple fronts, multiple armies, how you handle that, fighting those battles, building those armies properly. Here it's more about like, okay, what's the level of bullshit that I need to engage in? As for sieges themselves, I have to say one of the benefits of Warhammer 2 with sieges is like you can actually skip more of them. Like you might fight a lot more field battles in Warhammer 2 than you would sieges. And if you do have to fight the siege, yeah, you do cheese them. Like, you just run around with heroes on mounts. I do have mounts on these guys. Soak arrow fire, deplete the ammunition. Once the ammunition is depleted, you just send spellcasters and ranged units. Full-on melee unit for a gate, but you use magic. You kill a lot of the enemy, you win. It's that puzzle, it's that trick. And Moravi's campaign is certainly not the easiest. But it's also not the kind of it's not the only campaign that falls in this category. There's plenty of others. Like with Malekith, if you secure your initial territory, you pretty much won the campaign. With Imric, dealing with Snitch in Immortal Empires is a nightmare, but if you do deal with him, you've won. There's nothing that's going to be anywhere remotely as challenging as Snitch. So that's my counterpoint for the people like, oh, in the good old days in previous games it was better. No, it seemed better from the perspective that yes, the early game could create obstacles that if you didn't deal with them properly, it would spiral out of control. But if you did deal with them properly one way or another, you would end up just dominating the early game. It wasn't great campaign pacing. In fact, it was quite the opposite, because it's just pushing you towards abusing the game. It's pushing you towards dominating that early game. And it's pushing you towards achieving, to not lose the campaign specifically. Like if you're playing a Legendary, this is on Legendary. This is not like some normal campaign. This is Legendary very hard. it's pushing you in that perspective, because otherwise you'll flat out lose. You'll just end up having 5 stacks showing up against you and you'll lose. So you need to play this aggressive. You need to embrace this. But then that creates the problem that, well, once you overcome that early challenge, once you've stabilized the initial situation, you've won. And that is not a great dynamic. And it is specifically what Creative Assembly should avoid. So siege attacker, slowness of sieges, all those things that so many people, so many popular talking points that exist out there, they don't mean. The issue of campaign pacing, the end game, is real. One of the things I do think Creative Assembly could learn from Warhammer 2 actually is with regards to chapter objectives. They're not necessarily the best in the world, like for instance in this campaign, like one of the objectives is to set up corruption in Lefanar's territory, but because of your initial war with Terranok, you don't start a war with the Lefanar, you start a war with Terranok, and they will attack you, then they won't agree peace in any circumstance. Yeah, and you kind of have to be aggressive, because if you wait, then if you don't go to Ulfwan will be coming to you. And then also a Lefanar eventually, though in this case, fortunately, he actually ended up in a war with Malekith, so it's like he's gonna get obliterated over here. Sometimes it can go well, sometimes it can go poorly and cascade out of control. But it has to be more than just like, oh, the early game can have all these twists and turns and then the mid-late game is boring. It should be the opposite. Like, the early game should be the more static part of the game, whereas the mid-late game, and when I say mid-late game, think of like turn 25, 30 at most, is what I consider the mid-game, but really 20. Like, basically, once 20 turns, I think, is reasonable enough to consider the mid-game. It's really the mid-game and late game that need vast improvements in these kind of twists, in how things unfold, and how things are happening. So, that is my perspective on campaign pacing. Christine, signing out.